It was a cold autumn evening in the small village of Hallow's End, a place steeped in old legends and whispered fears. At the heart of the village, an ancient oak tree stood tall and proud, its gnarled branches twisting like skeletal fingers toward the darkening sky. The oak had been there for centuries, a silent witness to the lives and deaths of many villagers. But beneath its towering presence lay a secret, a tale so old that most had forgotten its chilling origins. Except for one, an elderly woman named Martha, who lived in a small, crumbling cottage at the edge of the village. Martha was the last keeper of the village's darkest story, one passed down through generations. It was the story of the White Lady. Every night, Martha would lock her doors and windows tightly, glancing nervously at the oak tree. Villagers noticed her behavior, but most dismissed it as the eccentricity of an old woman who had lived alone for far too long. They paid no mind to the warnings she muttered under her breath about the tree, and they ignored the way her eyes would cloud with fear whenever the wind stirred its branches. But the village children, curious and brave in their ignorance, were drawn to the oak. They dared one another to approach it after sunset, laughing and running back to their homes once they had touched its rough bark. They did not believe in the White Lady, a ghostly figure who was said to haunt the tree. After all, no one had seen her for years, until one fateful night. It was late October when a boy named Peter, determined to prove his bravery, accepted a dare to stay under the oak tree until midnight. His friends gathered in a circle around him, teasing him as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows across the village. The air was thick with the smell of decaying leaves, and the wind carried an unsettling chill. As darkness settled in, the group began to leave one by one, promising to return and check on Peter in the morning. Peter, alone under the towering oak, felt a strange unease creeping over him. The once familiar sounds of the village seemed distant, and the tree's branches swayed gently in the breeze, almost as if they were alive. He tried to shake off the feeling, but his gaze kept drifting toward the highest branches, where the moonlight filtered through the leaves in ghostly patterns. It was then that he heard it, a soft, mournful whisper carried by the wind. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, filling the night air with a palpable sense of dread. Peter's heart began to race. He looked around, but there was no one in sight. The village was quiet, the cottages dark. He was completely alone, or so he thought. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, Peter saw something move, a flicker of white against the dark bark of the tree. His breath caught in his throat as he turned his head slowly. Standing among the roots of the ancient oak was a figure, tall and slender, her form draped in a flowing white gown. Her hair hung loosely over her pale face, obscuring her features, but her eyes, two hollow black voids, seemed to pierce through him. The White Lady. Peter's body froze, his legs refusing to move as fear gripped him. The lady stepped forward, her bare feet barely making a sound on the forest floor. As she drew closer, Peter could see the bloodstains on her gown, the way her long, bony fingers twitched at her sides as if craving something, someone. He had heard the stories, of course. The White Lady was said to be the spirit of a young woman who had been betrayed by her lover long ago. Heartbroken, she had hanged herself from the very tree beneath which Peter now stood, and ever since, her restless spirit wandered, seeking vengeance on anyone who dared linger near her oak. Peter wanted to run, to scream, but his body refused to obey. The lady's gaze held him captive, her expressionless face sending waves of terror through his mind. She reached out a hand, and the air around Peter grew icy cold. He could feel the life draining from him, his heartbeat slowing as her touch neared. And then she spoke, her voice a low, haunting whisper that seemed to echo from the depths of the earth.
He betrayed me, and now he will pay for his sins.
Peter's vision blurred, and the last thing he saw was her skeletal hand reaching toward his chest. His scream died in his throat as the darkness swallowed him whole. The next morning, the villagers found Peter's lifeless body beneath the oak tree, his face frozen in an expression of sheer terror. No one could explain what had happened, but Martha knew. She had seen the signs, heard the whispers in the wind. The White Lady had claimed another victim, just as she had warned. And as the villagers gathered to mourn the loss of the boy, the ancient oak stood silent and still, its branches swaying gently in the breeze, as if it were satisfied. Yet deep within its twisted roots, the White Lady waited, her vengeance incomplete, her soul forever bound to the tree that had witnessed her despair. For in Hallow's End, the legend of the White Lady was not just a story. It was a warning, and those who ignored it never returned.